Well, let's look at some Anti-Sveshnikov theory. So Sveshnikov, after e4, c5, knight f3, and black plays knight c6, which usually means the Sicilian Sveshnikov variation. So the anti-Sveshnikov, bishop b5, my opponent surprised me a bit with queen b6. So this queen's getting involved kind of provocatively. And my immediate thoughts was just a tactical kind of trap, which isn't very good thinking if the trap's avoided. What is the trapper left with? Usually, often a bad position. But if the queen loses tempo, it doesn't matter. If black collects the two bishops, like sometimes this can be a big advantage to black. So knight c3 has got a trap in mind, but isn't so bad. Okay, so the trap, to take and then knight c7 check. That's the trap idea. He plays a6, and knight d5 isn't that good because he simply plays in the game queen d8, and the problem is that, well, if I take, he can take with this pawn. This knight will have to waste time coming back. I haven't gained anything. I've just lost the light square bishop. And in the game also, of course, now the d5 knight is a target after bishop e2. If the bishop retreats here, I'm going to get my bishop trapped with b5 and then c4. So that's hardly punishing black's queen b6. So bishop e2. After e6, I should have just humbly retreated back with minimal damage to the position, just knight c3. And we get a kind of, I don't know, I think, what's the evaluation on this, knight c3? It's still okay for white, it's just about equal. So say knight f6, d4, we reach a sort of normal kind of position again. So both sides have wasted time. But no, I play a bad move, knight f4, I think. After d6, c3, okay, it's got a logical idea to play d4, because otherwise d4 takes. I thought e5 might be a problem, but even so, knight c6 is not such a big problem. But the way I played it, allowing g5, this doesn't have to be so bad. Of course, if knight h3, g4, forking both knights, this was awkward what I played. I gave black the advantage, but actually here, knight h5 is better. And again, if we do an engine evaluation here, knight h5, there's some weaknesses created. It's stopping that fianchetto, knight h5, but g4 again, and black's still slightly better now. In fact, okay, this isn't so bad though. This, all of a sudden, if queen g5, knight g3, it isn't so bad. It's about equal again on engine evaluation. I think the engine is changing its mind quite a bit, because black does have that weakness, and maybe even that can be captured here without getting completely murdered. Maybe bishop e2 is not too good because of queen g6, but a move like d3, and white apparently is technically doing okay. So it didn't need to be a total disaster, this position, but knight d3 exacerbated it, and now black's got it totally in the driving seat, a great position. I just want to I'm going to return back to the opening though pretty soon for this idea of bishop c6, but before I do, there was another point in this game where I just castled into trouble, when in fact I think just an h3 move here would minimise the trouble I'm in. So say g3 was played, knight d1, and then taking knight f3. Black's advantage isn't such a huge one. Of course, it's much better for black, and it's preferable. But it's at least my king's not getting slaughtered. But okay. But the main thing. Let's go back earlier to this scenario here. So the key thing is, can the black queen be exploited here with bishop c6, queen c6? The interesting thing that I've discovered about this position, which I really want to share with you, is that I found one Murray Chandler game in this line with queen b6, but it wasn't really an amazing test of concept here after d4, because black played the meek move, not cd but d6, which immediately means d5, and white's doing very nicely here after d5, I believe. Nice space advantage in the centre, and it's going to be unpleasant for black, this position. Fragmented pawns in the centre. It's not so solid for black. But the key question about this position with d4 is, for me, c takes d4. Okay guys, I'll give you 10 seconds here as a quiz question. What would you take with the queen or the knight on d4, and why? You want to exploit here a transitory advantage, being able to kick the queen, or do you? Is there another transitory advantage which is a greater issue for black to exploit here? And that's what I find interesting about this Anti-Sveshnikov idea of knight c3 and then the bishop c6. This is the interesting point, believe it or not. So if I give you 10 seconds, think about this, and what would you take, either the queen or the knight? 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Engine analysis surprisingly indicates that knight takes d4, perhaps surprisingly, is no good. You've given black, the bishop pair, and black's solid here. This is solid. This structure, structurally solid. For example, black will be totally equal after a basic sequence of moves like this. There's nothing to break down here. Black's okay. Any e5 can be answered with knight d5 now, and the bishop's on it as well. So if we look here, actually queen d4 gives white, believe it or not, a small advantage, because there's a different thing being focused on, this g7. And the queen's got pressure on d5, helping pressure d5, which means now actually that after, say knight f6, e5 would be good for white, because say knight d5, you just double black's pawns, and it's a nice position for white, this kind of position here. Big advantage maybe even for white. So that's the way it seems to play it, for queen takes d4. So if you're going to give up the light square bishop in this line, this anti-Sveshnikov, maybe there's something to bear in mind. If b5, then rook d1, say, and if f6 is really forced because of knight f6, e5 being a problem, then again white's doing it okay here. This diagonal slightly weakened. Engine evaluation here I think is going to be favourable for white because of that ugly looking move f6. Let's see, queen for a few moves. It's going to be okay for white. White can just play even rook d2 and just double up on the d file. So there's pressure on the d file, emphasised, trebling. It's nice for white. It's a pleasant position. So I just wanted to show you this because actually this is quite interesting. This would seem to be a basic reply to avoid black avoiding the double pawns. Knight c3 is a tempting move to try and play for a trap. And after a6, taking on c6 for a specific reason, not in this line, not knight d5, but taking on c6 for the specific reason, and I'll promote this variation, so when I give you the PGN in the description of the video, you'll get the main line that I'm recommending. So I'm going to promote bishop c6, promote variation, and now after cd, queen takes d4. This is given as the main line, and I think this will give white a small advantage. So this is a bit of analysis for those interested in the theory of this anti-Sveshnikov, anti-Sveshnikov variation. Okay, so with queen b6. So queen takes d4. So the imbalance is, black's light square bishop is also hemmed in by all these light square pawns. White hasn't got a problem piece. He or she's lost the light square bishop, but has got pressure on the d file, and that as we saw, even consider after b5 trebling even on the d file, just to use that particular trump card. And if black's played f6, often this diagonal is going to be more tactically vulnerable, and there's still congestion issues for black to develop here. So a bit of analysis for those interested. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.